Hello, this is Domenico with EasyNomics, and we're going to continue another part of international economics, part of our global economy section within the new syllabus. And we're going to illustrate a free-floating exchange rate system to understand how a currency may appreciate or depreciate. Here we have a list of countries that use a free float system for their currency in the foreign exchange market. Specifically, we can look at the European Union that utilizes a free float and the United States that also uses a free float. In terms of some historical data, if we look at the value of a euro in terms of dollars, or how many dollars can 1 euro buy, here we have a 10-year span, and we can see that the euro lost significant value in 2014 going into the year 2015. All right, back in 2014, 1 euro could buy $1.37. And then a year later, in April of 2015, 1 euro could only buy $1.09. So we can see that there is a depreciation in the value of the euro. Now, why is that? The United States economy was gaining strength in 2012, 13, and 2014, and as a result, the Federal Reserve Bank, the central bank of the United States, began to engage in contractionary monetary policy, which coincided with the European Union going in the opposite direction of engaging in expansionary monetary policy. So the US economy was economically strong, leading to the Federal Reserve to contract, and the European Union was facing some problems. There were, I think, a potential sovereign debt default possibility in Greece, and some other issues within Europe, and that was pushing the European Central Bank to engage in expansionary monetary policy to push the economy up, or to prop it up, we could say. So how does that affect investors in the foreign exchange market? Investors seeing that data may want to, if they're holding euros, to sell it off before it depreciates, and then buy into the US dollar. So we're going to use speculative investors as the force behind our example here when they're looking at that macroeconomic data and the behavior of central banks in the United States and the foreign exchange. So we need to use two graphs side by side. Graph A is the market for US dollars in the foreign exchange system, and we're measuring euros per dollar, or $1, how many euros can it buy? Right? And we have a downward sloping demand for dollars, we're using the dollar symbol there, and an upward sloping supply of dollars, S for dollars. And the equilibrium at point A provides an exchange rate at E1 and a quantity supplied and demanded at Q1. In graph B, we have the market for euros in the foreign exchange rate system, and we're looking at dollars per euro, or for each euro, how many dollars can it buy? And again, we have an upward sloping supply curve according to the law of supply for euros, and a downward sloping demand for euros labeled D for euros. The intersection at point D provides an equilibrium at E1 and equilibrium at Q1. So this is very similar to what we've done in micro. Chapters on micro relating to the role of the price mechanism are useful here for our analysis. So on the data, again, we want to highlight that this is the euro, and the euro has depreciated from 2014 to 2015. So one way to illustrate that, here, the market for euros, is what could potentially be happening to demand for euros, or what could potentially be happening to the supply for euros. So this is one way to illustrate that. Let's say you are an investor in the foreign exchange rate system. You buy and sell currencies, and you look at macroeconomic data and the potential of monetary policy to change and how that's going to impact a particular currency in the foreign exchange rate system. So you're looking at data of the United States, and you see that the United States is becoming strong. unemployment's going down, GDP is rising, and perhaps you want to start to invest in buying dollars because that data should lead to an increase in demand for US dollars among other investors. So let's go ahead and illustrate that. Right? So speculative investors, seeing that macro data in the United States, start to buy into the dollar. And let's just assume that these investors are holding euros. So they're going to sell their euros and demand dollars. So the demand for dollars increases, right? Goes from D1 to D2 for dollars. So let's assume that the price or the exchange rate is held constant in the short run. Oop. From E1, so being held constant, right? And here we see that the quantity demanded has increased from Q1 to Q2. Here we are at point B. And we notice that the quantity demanded at point B is greater than the quantity supplied at point A. So what does that do? That puts upward pressure on the value of the US dollar. So the value of the US dollar begins to rise. And as a result, other investors start to sell off their currency to capture that rise. So the quantity supplied starts increasing while the quantity demanded begins to decrease until the two are equal to each other at point C, setting the long run equilibrium. Now, this occurs quite fast in the foreign exchange rate. So here we have the new exchange rate at E2 with a new quantity established at Q3. So here we see that the US dollar compared to the euro has appreciated. That's an appreciation of the US dollar in terms of euros in the foreign exchange rate. And we're assuming that this is a result of speculative investors deciding to sell off the euro, buy dollars because they expect that it will appreciate. Okay? So if investors are selling off euros to buy dollars, then that must mean that the supply of euros is increasing in the market for euros within the foreign exchange rate system. So here we have the supply curve shifting out from S1 to S2, S2 for euros. We're going to hold the value of the currency constant in the short run at E1. The quantity supplied, as a result, increases from point D to point E. And we see that at Q2, the quantity supplied of the currency is greater than the quantity demanded. So that puts downward pressure on the price or on the value of the currency. So the value of the currency begins to fall to the new equilibrium at point F. So here we can see that the euro has depreciated as a result, falling from E1 to E2, establishing a new equilibrium at Q3 at point F. Okay, so here we see a depreciation of the euro versus the appreciation of the US dollar. Okay, so here we see that. And that's what we're using. That model is illustrating what we see happening with the foreign exchange. Euro's losing value. We're assuming that's a result of speculative investors selling off on the euro, increasing its supply, causing its depreciation, and leading to an increase in the value of the US dollar. All right, so let's go ahead and analyze this as we would for a paper exam. Here we have graph A and graph B illustrating a free floating exchange rate system. In graph A, we're looking at the market for US dollars in the foreign exchange rate system. In graph B, we're looking at the market for euros, again, in the foreign exchange rate system. In graph A and B, we have upward sloping supply curves labeled S1 and S2 in graph B. Supply of dollars in graph A, supply of euros in graph B. We have downward sloping demand for currencies. In graph A, it's the demand for US dollars, D1 and D2. And in graph B, it's the demand for euros, labeled D1 for euros. In graph A, we have an equilibrium established where D1 equals S. Let's say it's S1. At point A, it provides an equilibrium exchange rate at E1. And it provides an equilibrium quantity supply and demand of dollars in the foreign exchange for euros at Q1. In graph B, in the market for euros, where D1 intersects with S1 at point D, it provides an equilibrium value of the currency at E1 and equilibrium quantity supply and demand at Q1. Now, as a result of the US economy becoming strong, GDP is rising, unemployment is falling, and the central bank is hinting that they will engage in contractionary monetary policy, speculative investors decide to buy the US dollar, knowing or predicting, I should say, that it will appreciate. So they begin to demand more US dollars. So demand increases from D1 to D2. In the short run, we will hold the value of the US dollar per euros per dollar constant at E1. Thus, at point B, the quantity demanded exceeds the quantity supplied. That puts upward pressure on the value of the currency to rise from E1 to E2. That leads to an increase in the quantity supplied along the supply curve from point A to C, or from Q1 to Q3, and a decrease in the quantity demanded from point B to C along the D2 curve, or a decrease from Q2 to Q3, establishing a new equilibrium where S1 equals D2 with a new value at E2 and a new quantity supplied and demanded at Q3. Thus, that illustrates that the US dollar has appreciated in value. If investors want to increase their demand for dollars, they must be holding some other currencies. So we're going to assume that they're holding euros, and they decide to sell off on the euro in order to demand dollars. So in graph B, we see that the supply of euros increases from S1 to S2. We're going to hold the value of the euro constant in the short run at E1. And we see that at Q2, quantity supplied is greater than quantity demanded. That puts downward pressure on the euro, so it begins to depreciate. And as it falls, the quantity demanded increases along the demand curve from point D to F, and the quantity supply decreases from E to F, or from Q2 to Q3, establishing a new equilibrium where S2 equals D1 with an equilibrium value at E2 and an equilibrium quantity supply and demand at Q3. So basically, that's the use of our analysis for microeconomics, particularly explain the price mechanism and how we can apply that in the foreign exchange rate system to explain appreciation of a currency and depreciation of a currency. Okay? In the next video, I will illustrate this again, but instead of in graph A shifting demand, I will shift supply to illustrate an appreciation. And the market for euros, instead of shifting supply, I will shift demand to show a depreciation. So there's two ways you can illustrate that. And that's it. If you have any questions, feel free to comment, and don't forget to subscribe and to like. Thank you so much.